Hello, Bob. Debt is a common financial concept that many people prefer not to talk about. Financial anxiety is a terrifying psychological state that unmanaged debt has pushed many into. What does it mean to be in debt?
When you borrow money with the intention or agreement of paying it back at an interest, we say you have taken a loan and therefore you are in debt.
Is it financially wrong to be in debt?
Financially, it is not wrong to be in debt.
What is the difference between a good debt and a bad debt?
However, it really depends on how you use or misuse the debt that you are into that will determine whether for you it was a wrong decision to be in debt or it was a right decision to be in debt. A good debt is the debt whereby you have borrowed some money, you've been able to secure an asset that is making you more money. So, if you are to pay back a certain percentage of the principal amount you had borrowed, the asset that you have acquired enables you to pay for that very, very easily. At the end of the day, if you had taken a certain amount of money in borrowing, the asset you have acquired will help you to be able to repay all the debt and continue making you more money into the future. A bad debt is whereby you have borrowed some money and you have acquired a liability, for example, and instead of the liability making you money, it is costing you more money. So you have to go back to your pocket, you have to go back to your other earnings so that you can be able to service the loan or the debt, since you acquired a liability that is not giving you any value addition as far as your finances are concerned. The people who are in good debt are so happy for the great financial success they have managed to achieve in their lives. Unfortunately, the people who are in bad debt are in deep financial anxiety since their financial future seems to be dark and so uncertain. A good debt is as different from a bad debt like a day is from night. As much as you can, ensure that you are in a good debt.
What is a debt trap?
Many people today are finding themselves in debt, and instead of being able to repay the debt they are in, they end up borrowing more and more to the extent that they are not able to pay any of the debt that they have. What do I mean? One could have secured a loan using their payslip, and therefore automatically the deductions are made at the end of the month. Now that the deductions are too high, someone turns to other alternative methods of borrowing, for example, the mobile money providers and so many other money lending apps. So, the individual borrows from one platform to pay another platform, then borrows again from another platform to pay another platform. A funny cycle of acquiring debt to pay existing debt to be in debt again. And when this is the case, we say that someone has fallen into a debt trap. Unfortunately, when one has fallen into a debt trap, if debt management is not done, the person gets to sink deeper and deeper into debt, which at the end of the day causes someone financial stress, depression, and their life may easily come to an end Yes, they are alive, but just surviving. They do not get to understand any taste of life, and they hate topics of finances since they are not able to even meet their very basic needs, which require finances. When someone is in a debt trap, they need to accept that is the situation so that they can be able to reorganize themselves once again, probably with the help of a financial consultant and a psychologist, so that they can be able to start again. There are so many habits that make us fall deeper and deeper into debt. And if we get to understand these habits, most probably we can be able to always be in good debt, avoiding bad debt, and we can be able to service our debt and take the best advantage of the loan or the debts that we could be in.
What tips can help us not get into bad debt?
Some of the habits that we need to be careful and take them very seriously if we really need to acquire that financial freedom and liberty in life are as follows. Habit number 1, false feeling of financial security. When someone is able to earn something at the end of the day, at the end of 2 weeks, or even at the end of the month, one is on a payroll, one might feel very secure and safe as far as finances are concerned, and therefore they take a loan and therefore they're in debt. After a few months, they top up the loan again until they can not be able to borrow anymore because they are at the limit as far as their payslip is concerned. People do this because they are somehow assured deep within them that they have a pay at the end of the month, and therefore, even if they take a loan today, they will be able to pay the loan at the end of the month. And therefore, they end up getting more and more loans in very many places, having it in their heads that they will be able to pay at the end of the month. When this happens emotionally without one being aware of how deep in debt they are getting, they end up overcommitting themselves. And at the end of the month, they have borrowed maybe twice or even thrice of what they earn. And therefore, in actual sense, they cannot be able to pay the debts. How did they get here? They had a false sense of financial security that they can be able to borrow because they will be able to pay at the end of the month, and therefore falling into the trap of debt. We need to be careful with this habit of having a false feeling of financial security. Number 2, there is the habit of borrowing that is driven by ability to borrow instead of purpose-driven borrowing. You see, if you present your payslip and therefore you qualify to borrow a certain amount of money, and you end up borrowing the money, even though you don't have any use, meaningful use for the money, you've borrowed the money simply because you are able, not because you have a purpose for the borrowing that you've made. In your phone, the many money lending apps in your phone tell you that you qualify for a certain amount of money, and therefore you borrow to the limit simply because you have the ability to borrow, but not because you are driven by a purpose of borrowing. When you have formed this habit of borrowing simply because you have the ability to borrow, because you qualify to borrow, instead of having a financial purpose for borrowing, you end up overcommitting yourself, you end up overborrowing, and you sink deeper and deeper into debt, and you find yourself drowning seriously in debt. It's therefore very important to be careful and to let your borrowing be purpose-driven borrowing rather than ability-driven borrowing. Habit number 3 Or situation number 3 that is making many people to sink deeper and deeper into borrowing is easy access to borrowing. Many years ago, one needed a title deed, maybe a car logbook, or some other solid financial statement for a bank to lend you some money. It took a long time for this processing to be done. This has changed in our times. You only need a smartphone whereby you download 10 or even 20 money lending app, different of them, and you can end up borrowing money from the 20 money lending app in your smartphone. You don't need a title deed, you don't need a logbook, you don't need any solid financial statement. You can even borrow at the comfort of your bed. And many young people, many adults are falling into this trap of borrowing simply because they can easily access this borrowing. This has made many people to drown deeper and deeper in debt. They borrow to the level that they cannot be able to repay. And if you ask them what they were borrowing for, they simply have nothing to show for the huge borrowings they have done using their smartphones until they are listed with the CRB because they are not able to pay. So, easy access to borrowing is another trap that is making many people to drown deeper and deeper into debt. Number 4 is the habit of borrowing to acquire liabilities. Remember, a liability costs you money. So you acquire a liability and it continues to cost you more money. It continues to eat into your pocket. The other person will borrow to acquire an asset. The asset will be making them money. And therefore, even what they have borrowed, the asset will enable them to repay what they had borrowed fully and continue making them more money into the future. But many people today, either they do not understand the differences or the difference between a liability and an asset. They cheat themselves that the house they live in is an asset. It is a liability. It costs you money. They cheat themselves that that personal car one has bought is an asset. It is not. It is a liability. It costs you more money and it keeps. So that smartphone you are having, it is not an asset. It costs you a lot of money to sustain it online, using it to call and so on and so forth. If it is not used for any commercial purposes, it is such a liability to you. And therefore, taking a loan or getting into debt to acquire a liability financially is not a wise decision. And this is what has made so many people to sink deeper and deeper into debt. They are drowning in it. Last but not least, there is the habit of addiction in borrowing. Borrowing addiction, it is there today. Someone is in the habit of borrowing from another place, borrowing from all platforms available. Not that they have any good reason for borrowing. Maybe they even borrowing so that they can be able to satisfy another addiction, maybe of drugs and substance abuse, addiction of alcohol, sex addiction, gambling addiction. Maybe they are borrowing with the purpose of satisfying even another addiction. Because if one has got a borrowing addiction, chances are very high they have another number of addictions in their lives, which they could be borrowing so as to satisfy. People these days are in the habit of gambling and betting. I've seen so many people cheating themselves that they will borrow a certain amount of money, maybe 1,000 shillings, Kenyan money, so that they can make 10 bets with the hope that they'll be able to win a million or hit a jackpot of several millions. You can imagine there are so many millions of people doing the same. And therefore the probability of one person who has tried 10 times betting, winning, is close to zero. And when this is the case, someone gets to borrow again because there is that unrealistic hope that I've tried, and therefore I think if I try one more time, 2 more times, it will be my chance to win, which is not the case in many times. And therefore, many people end up sinking deeper and deeper into debt because they borrowed to bet, or they borrowed to satisfy some other addictions they are having in their lives. In conclusion, it is very important to always remember that when you are getting into debt, let it be on a proper financial purpose. Don't take an emotional move so that you can be able to have in your account the first millions. You've never had millions in your account, but because you are qualified to borrow several millions, you just want to know how it feels when you have millions in your account. But millions you've not planned for, and therefore idle money, which will end up getting misused in every way, and you'll find yourself broke very soon. If you have money that you've borrowed without having any purpose for the money, you better return the money immediately and work your way to pay the interest that you will have incurred in the course of time. Having idle money in your account is financially very dangerous. You'll end up misusing it, getting deeper into some other borrowing until you are completely trapped in debt trap, and therefore your financial future gets to be very dark, very uncertain, throwing you to serious financial anxiety. Thank you.